Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, October 7th edition of the SIG Release biweekly meeting. This is a meeting that is recorded and available on the internet, so please be mindful of what you say and do. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct, and in general, just be excellent to each other. I think that should be fairly simple for this great group of people. So we've got a few things on the agenda. Can someone not hear me? Sorry.
I hear you.
Okay. Anybody else? I think it might be you, George.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Cool, perfect.
I hear as well.
All right. So we've got quite a few things on the agenda. I am going to do some shuffling as we talk. In the meantime, if you have things that should go on the agenda, if you have not seen the agenda, I'm popping it into the chat right now. Please take a moment to put your names on the agenda if you're in attendance. And if you have any additional topics, please put it at the bottom of the agenda. Let me just move that. And okay. All right. So I just moved the, or did I? Okay. I'm going to move the GitHub issue for AIs to the bottom, since that one will take a while. I'm not sure if that we're actually going to get through this agenda today. This is pretty jam-packed. But let's kick it off. The first one is, should artifacts published by the publishing bot be release blocking? I have Aaron and Nikita listed as the owners for that question. I believe this is something that came up in the 115 AIs, but I'm not sure if either of them are on the call.
Doesn't look like either are.
Okay, cool. My idea, yes. I think they should be. So people who are not familiar with the publishing bot, essentially it's a set of configs that allow you to take something that is living in the staging repo or staging folder of the Kubernetes repo and move that from the, essentially like migrate it a little bit. It still stays in the repo, but it also lands in its own repo, right? And the publishing bot is responsible for that config. So there is, I think it's pretty important for those to be release blocking, as a lot of our subsequent releases depend on that. Our underlying release artifacts can potentially depend on that. So I think it would be important that they're release blocking. So that's just my 2 cents. Anybody else want to speak on that?
It makes sense to me to have them release blocking, but I feel like there was some sort of inversion where, like, the sequencing or something, we had issues with that, but I don't recall if that was just a historical situation. But maybe we can specifically try and invite Aaron and Nikita to the next meeting in 2 weeks to hash out specifics.
Okay, sounds good. All right.
Or would it be better to do asynchronously if we just do an issue for this, proposing it?
I think we can do that. Yeah, I have. There's an action item on the. If you scroll to the bottom of the notes, the GitHub issue for AIs for, let's say, retro AIs, right? And that one includes the AIs from 115 as well as 116. I think there might be a few more to capture that I have to add in, but that is most of the list. So I think it's near the top of it. All right. So next one is publishing instructions on how to consume alpha, beta, RC today. It will get better once we have release channels for daily testing and prod builds, indubitably. But in the meantime, we could write up a TLDR, right? So yes, totally agreed. I had, I don't know, a few months ago, started a super official Twitter poll about whether or not people are consuming alpha, beta are RCs of Kubernetes. And out of the 100-something people, I think, that responded, 55% of those people said they didn't know about them, right? So that's something I would love to fix in the coming cycles. I think the mention of having separate channels for this might have been Tim putting that down. Essentially, what we want to make sure that we do is when we publish artifacts, they publish to places where they're very clear that the artifacts are either a nightly artifact or a testing artifact or actual release artifact. So the idea would be to have multiple channels, and we also need to determine what we mean by artifact in this case, right? Is it a deb or is it a deb or RPM? Are we just talking tarballs? Like we should be more specific with that because there are things that we can and can't do today. So questions, comments? This is not our documentation specifically, but there is a doc from the kubeadm folks about testing pre-releases. I would actually like to move parts of that doc into a more visible location. But essentially, we have two places that we land artifacts today, and I will post them in the chat. One of them is the bucket for Kubernetes release. It's Kubernetes release. And the second one is Kubernetes dev/CI, I think is the correct thing for the bucket. But let me just show you these. And this may be entirely new to someone, so hopefully that's the case. All right, so buckets and release, right? And then the CI one is come on, computer. All right, cool. And then CI is here. And essentially, those are pretty web browser on top of GCS buckets. Those GCS buckets hold all of the artifacts that our CI jobs kick out, or that are a part of our release process, our staging and release process. So if no one has seen them before, it contains the releases for it contains the artifacts for the server components, the node components, the test components, as well as, at least today, Hypercube. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in seeing more of that, if you're curious about what needs to be done with those, or what you would like to be able to do with those, like capturing use cases would be helpful for this. Knowing exactly what artifacts you need and what you're trying to do with them is helpful. But yeah, this doc on kubeadm with pre-releases. So this doc you can check out too. So if you're using kubeadm today and you're interested in testing with pre-releases, it gives some instructions there. Overall, I think that the documentation that we may have on this subject is kind of not as easily visible as it could be. So we do have an action item this cycle to clean some of that stuff up. But if you have explicit use cases, we'd love to hear them. So I'll stop talking now.
Is there anybody on the call who'd be interested in kind of going through those various artifacts, looking at workflows, and trying to write up a kind of a one-pager that we could PR into the docs?
I can try that. Me.
And that was Carlos?
Yeah,
Carlos, yeah.
Sign up?
Awesome.
All right, so let me just put you down. And I think the Cubadium docs have a bunch of good content that you should essentially steal. That should be in a highly visible place. So I'm thinking Kubernetes community / contributors guide devel or something, right? Right next to the workflow for people.
Yeah.
I'm actually working on the developer's guide right now, reworking it. So I'd love to be able to help you integrate that in there if that adds any value. This is Marky, by the way.
Hey, Marky. Yeah, for sure. I think it would be super useful to understand what the future design would look like, so that we can figure out how best to integrate. But yeah, we can, if you and Carlos want to sync up, and I'm happy to stay out of the loop as y'all work on that. But feel free to ask me any questions.
Cool, Carlos. I'll reach out to you a little bit later this morning.
Okay.
I'm on Pacific time, so.
I'm on CEST time, on the European time.
Okay, cool. I'll find a time for us to sync up and go over.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Awesome. Got a little collaboration going on. All right, so so any questions, comments, concerns on that one before we move on? All right, okay. Next one is definitions of priority, right? So this one came up as it is, I think everyone has somewhat of a different definition of what priority is. So we have a few ones that we use pretty frequently in Kubernetes, and those are priority important long-term, priority important soon, and priority critical urgent, right? I'm gonna cough, hold on. So one of the so I think having a singular definition of what each of these mean will be useful going forward. I think the reason this came up is that the bug triage team has difficulties towards the end of the cycle trying to determine what is something that is truly high priority, right? Or I think the release team in general, right? What is truly high priority? So if you take a look at the test info labels, or you mouse over any one of these labels, it will give you a definition, right? And I like looking at the critical urgent one, right? Because it says highest priority must be actively worked on as someone's top priority right now. And then the comment says stuff is burning. If it's not being actively worked on, someone is expected to drop what they're doing immediately to work on it. Team leaders are responsible for making sure that all issues labeled with this priority in their area are actively worked on. Examples include user visible bugs and core features, broken builds, or tests, and critical security issues, right? So that is an expanded definition that probably deserves to be part of the mouse over definition, right? We can figure out how to kind of compact that, but I tend to agree with stuff is burning. This is so broken. If it doesn't get fixed right now, there will be a problem, right? As critical urgent. And then, for the priority important long-term, important over the long term, but may not be staffed or may need multiple releases to complete, right? I pretty much agree with that one. The one for important soon must be staffed and worked on either currently or very soon, ideally in time for the next release, right? So for people that are on the release team, I'm curious if you agree with those.
Well, so basically, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so critical urgent one is okay, but important long-term, important soon ones might be like, it is what I think personally is that it might be hard sometimes to decide between long-term and soon. How is someone going to know is it really needed or not? Because is it needed right now or not? And I think a lot of issues are ending up with important soon because even if they're not going to work now, maybe people think like it should be done at some point, and then it's soon gone. So I'm not sure how do we decide between when is actually something long term or not.
Yeah, and I think that I see where you're going there. So I personally use like important soon as my default priority. There are also additional priorities. I don't want to not mention them. It's priority awaiting more evidence and priority backlog. Those are not used as frequently as any of the others. But I see what you mean. And if you take something that is, say, priority long term, right? But priority long term often leads to like umbrella issues and things that have things that are going to take multiple releases to land. One of the questions that comes up there is, well, if it takes multiple releases to land and we're having problems landing it in one release, like does that make so is part of it more important than the rest, right? So say I have a priority important long-term issue and it's not an umbrella, right? How do I handle that? How do I move it through the release cycle? Is it the job of bug triage to even watch that? I don't think that that's true, right? A SIG should be responsible for determining the priority of the issues or PRs that they have in place. I don't think that something that is marked as important long term is less important than something that is maybe, say, important soon, right? It still needs to land, and it may need to land. It may need to land in the same time as an important soon, right? Just for that long-term status to hold, right? I need to land it over 5 cycles, but I won't make good progress unless I get this bit in for this cycle, right? So maybe that needs to be broken up into its own issue, or like I think we should not have to make that determination for SIGs, right? I would also see a problem in bumping the priority of something for the sake of making sure that it gets into release, right? I don't think that's the way we should be going about doing stuff, or that SIG should be going about doing stuff. I doubt there are many cases of that, but I can imagine that there are probably a few.
Sort of a question / comment, but do you actually see people changing that priority when they actually like begin actively working on it? Like I have not really seen that.
I'd say very rarely.
Yeah, so depending on what it is and depending on who you are, like as a SIG chair, I try to go in and update priorities when I can, when I touch an issue, or if I'm doing grooming of some sort. I can't say that it's going to be common for every contributor, though. It depends on how much you're invested in the entire ecosystem of all the issues.
Guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry about the voice. So I just have a dumb question, which is, what is the problem that we're trying to address here? Is it just there are too many different labels for priorities, and like, yeah, so it's because it's not clear from reading just the notes. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's trying to assess the criticality of an issue for the release team, right? How do we determine that something that is, when it comes down to it and they're scanning through the backlog of like things are critical urgent or things are important long term, how do we understand like the importance at that point in time for that issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that we need to go back and chase the SIG and say like, hey, are you actually trying to land this, or is it something we can bump, right?
So like, are we trying to like reduce the number of different priorities, or are we trying to have a new, I don't know.
We're trying to clarify the definition of what those priorities are, right?
So I guess, okay.
There was a reduction that happened a while ago. So if you ignore awaiting more evidence and backlog and needs priority, there's 3 levels right now: soon, long-term, critical, urgent. So that is simplified, but the gap right now that we're perceiving is in how people use them. So for example, not just on the current release team deciding what goes in or if something should be deferred from the current release, on patch releases also, we're supposed to only be bringing in things that are critical urgent, but the vast majority of what gets merged for the patch releases is labeled important long-term. And almost, I'd have to go and pull the numbers specifically, but I feel like the majority of things that go by say important long-term, and they're things where there's like a null pointer exception or a panic or like very clearly obvious like serious bugs, and they're no-brainers to merge. They should have been labeled critical urgent, but for whatever reasons they weren't viewed that way. So if we aren't using these labels with any sort of consistency today, then that means they don't have, like the next level simplification would be to just remove them entirely.
Yeah.
And there, if you look at needs priority, a third of the things that merged into 116 never even had a priority.
I think for the patch release stuff, especially around like crasher bugs, I think that's people trying to be like honest about things that escaped previous releases. Like
or also like if
it's rare and it escapes
exactly
a couple releases, like is the world burning down?
Yeah.
Probably not. So like I feel weird saying like stop the presses, like we have to fix this in the next 24 hours if it's something that has existed for 2 releases, but at the same time it's reproducible and it's a crashing bug. Like it should really be fixed if we can fix it.
And there, I think in a lot of organizations, you end up with a two-level priority scheme: the urgency of the thing and the severity of the thing. Yeah. So we have them conflated in a single set. So things that are clearly major consequential types of things, but have been around for a long time and are corner case types of major failures. I mean, if your kubelet dies, that's a pretty big deal.
It's bad.
Probably.
It's bad. It's not the greatest.
Yeah, but even then, right? Like we've seen ones where it's a nil pointer crashing bug if you have an alpha feature enabled, and it's like I don't know what the severity like. It's severe if you're using this alpha feature. It's not severe in like production supported default configuration. So I will also say, but I know you're not saying we should drop all the labels, Tim, but like these also are useful in sort of local stack ranked contexts. So if a particular SIG is looking at prioritizing their work for a release, and they say, what are all our open issues that are labeled with our SIG? Let's go broadly, kind of make sure the priority buckets look right. Like, here are the 2 critical issues that we're working on right now, and here's the 20 things that we really think should be fixed this release, and here's the things that we wouldn't want to age out. Like, these are important long-term. We want to keep them open. Like, that's how I use them personally, like with API machinery and SIG-Auth. And so it might be that we're trying to serve too many audiences with not enough signal for these labels. Like if we're wanting them to mean identical things as far as like release blocking nature for the release team, that I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that.
And that's fine. I think that we should aim to serve the SIGs over the release team first and foremost, because they're the people who are actively doing the triage. Or should actively be doing the triage for all of their SIGs. Like if you're finding those labels useful, and Jordan, I'm using them the same way that you are, essentially using them to stack rank things within my SIGs.
I mean, the milestone to me is the biggest signal. Like if the SIG is keeping issues in the milestone, like that's a signal that they think that this is release blocking for the milestone. And like the criticality or priority, that can, like if there are things marked critical urgent in the milestone, like we as the SIGs working on it and as the release team monitoring it, like there should be more frequent feedback and updates on those things, and we should think really hard before we kick one of those out of the milestone.
Yeah.
But to me, like the milestone is it's the end marker.
Cool. Yeah, no, I dig that. So George, to your point, I don't find the lifecycle active label to be useful at all personally. It's one of those things that if it becomes inactive and it has that label on it, like what does it mean? So Yeah, that's just my 2 cents. But yes, some SIGs do use lifecycle active to denote that someone is working on the issue. The signal is for me is someone assigned to the issue. That if they're assigned to the issue, then they have intent to work on it. If they're not working on it already, I don't think that it provides a good signal of like in progress, right? Because these things get stale across time. So we should try to figure out what we're trying to get out of this one. Do we want to clarify the intent? Do we want to suggest that more people use the milestone or are honest about milestone usage? My concern at the end of the day is not so much about the priority stuff, but about the priority should not concern us too much as it concerns another SIG. The milestoning should, as Jordan was mentioning. So I think that overall we need more of a solution around what we do towards the end of the cycle, remove or clear on milestones. And I think that this is also a question that came up during the retro. It might be listed in our notes today, actually. No, maybe not. Okay. Okay. Well, so comments. What I don't feel like we've gotten to a resolution.
So going back to Linus's question on what are we trying to solve, I think we actually got into should we change things before what are we trying to solve? And the first thing that we were trying to solve out of the retro was, hey, these are actually defined inconsistently in a lot of different places. Could we just tighten up the documentation? And what that would solve maybe is a fairly weak thing, but it would solve the documentation being inconsistent. The actual usage or things beyond that, I think, is something different, but we should at least consistently document what's there today.
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, if we should look at the label definitions and decide if we agree with those, right? Overall, I agree with the ones that I saw, right? So I think that's the first place, because those allow mouse overs for each of the labels. So fixing that first, and then tracking down everywhere that we have documented priority, whether it be in handbooks, whether it be in release guides. So is anyone interested in taking that work on? I mean, don't all put your hands up.
I guess the real question is at what priority, right?
I would say the mouse overs are a little bit of higher priority to me, because I think that will pop up for. I mean, that's something that anyone who may not have read our documentation can mouse over, right? And then figuring out all the places that documentation that mentions priority is, and you can use Hound for that. So. And if you haven't seen Hound, thank you, Dims, by the way. So we'll do something like this. Right. So you can see an example here. George, are you volunteering? Okay, cool. All right, so George on the hook for that. Sweet. All right, example search. Right. Okay. Any final comments on this one before we move through? Cool.
Oh, sorry. I just have a quick question. So we have all these different labels and stuff, but is there like, other than, GitHub itself, like, do we have any sort of,
Magic.
or, like a front end or something that shows you like, oh, like here are all the labels, or, some sort of,
Yeah,
uh,
it's
If
so
you're willing to accept a YAML file as a front end, yes.
okay.
so actually that YAML file shows you there's a YAML file, but there's also the labels.md. So that is
Uh-huh.
the prettified version of that, and that is here.
So I'm sure people here on the call are familiar with Eric Feda's,
Fedabot.
yeah, Fedabot. And I feel like
Formerly known as Fedabot, now Kate's TriageBot.
Kate's TriageBot, right? Like, can't we have something like that to address things like this issue has too many labels, or I don't know, various other like janitorial things? Because I mean, Fedabot, or sorry, TriageBot, I guess. While it is annoying, I mean, I found it very useful in telling me things, like, oh, this is stale, or do something about it.
So we have to decide what you would want to do there, right? Because we already
Right.
have things like need SIG, right? So it has the need SIG label, and then you need to apply the SIG label to get that label removed. We also have like needs kind, and it's same, I need a kind label, and if I don't have it, I'm going to keep this label on and prevent you from merging, right?
Right.
So what would you want to see there?
I mean, I would think we could benefit from, I don't know, like, if you have something that's priority, what was the top one? Like, things are
Critical urgent.
Yeah, critical urgent. And let's say it has nobody assigned. Maybe that's a problem. Like, do we know for a fact that all critical urgent, labels have somebody assigned to it with like some sort of status, that it's like fresh, like people are actually updating these things, and there's like a window, and like we actually know what's going on, instead of just like maybe somebody is assigned, but they're not working on it because a lower priority ticket is actually being worked on instead of that one, or
So I'm trying to figure out how we measure someone's like, because we need to be flexible without like, I mean, like at the end of the day, this is an open source project, so we can't like expect people to
right.
work
I
on things,
mean,
right?
but I mean, you could have something like as simple as, it's been a week since there's no, since the last comment on this issue that's priority urgent or critical or something. Can you please give us an update? Just like a question, and it'll nag people, but it might be useful. I don't know. Like,
I'm always scared of I don't disagree, but I'm always scared of bot nags, especially like Bob, you've gone through part of a cycle for doing enhancements now, right? So you see that there's something about the human touch that gets
sure.
more.
But I mean,
done.
we could, in the very least, enforce rules like, for example, this issue has been marked priority super urgent for over a month. Should we, reduce the priority level because it's not whatever, just to align the, I guess, expectations better or something, if something is just, not being looked at, or there's no update, etc.
Yeah, so my only note is that we'd have to find a non-spammy time frame to do it. So
Yeah.
month sounds reasonable.
Right.
Yeah, it's the whole thing of like, if we start drumming up issues that are supposed to be of a certain priority, and they start spamming people compared to things that they're actually working on, like what happens to their inbox. That's kind of like my only concern there. So Bob is saying, just comment on the bot responses. Some folk have already chimed in and said that they have rules that pretty much dump bot responses to the trash because of how much spam they get. Right. So if you take for one really great example is the or the bot responses on test failures. Right. There are some people who send those straight to the trash. Right. And as a result, that issue might be getting lost, even though it's actively being worked on. Right. So that's one of the concerns, because there's so much bot spam around test failures. Some people don't even look at them. Right. so, so something to be aware of, and like that's part of my fear in introducing more. See, Jordan immediately filters all bot responses, so um, that's one of my concerns in introducing more bot responses to the workflow today. I think that if you if you are a SIG and you're doing review of your issues, you should be watching the issues that come up, and the ones that are priority critical urgent, you should be doing your best to also work on pinging the people who are assigned to those and making sure they are actually assigned to people. Right?
Yeah, just to level set, like in the whole repo, in the Kubernetes repo, there are 10 issues marked critical urgent today. And that they're spread across SIG. So each SIG might have 1, 2, 3, which like that doesn't seem out of control to me. So I would hesitate to put like tons of process and bot nagging and like 10 issues as a number that we can actually like go look at and ask questions of humans, and it's not that big a deal.
Yeah. So, all right. So, I think we need to do more noodling on it. I'm not sure that we have a thing that we need to do outside of making sure that documentation is clear about what we mean by priority. From there, I'm not saying that maybe bots aren't the answer in some way, shape, or form for something later. I just don't know what that thing is right now.
I think the place I see the most confusion is actually around cherry picks, because we've said things like only critical urgent issues should be backported. And so it might be helpful to expand. I know Tim just went and updated like the cherry pick guidelines. It might be helpful to give specific examples. Like if this is a crashing bug in a default configuration, it's okay to mark this critical urgent. Like even if it's rare, even if it escaped 2 releases, it's okay. If it's an alpha configuration, then maybe it's not critical urgent. Like just giving specific examples, because I see people wanting to do the right thing, but not being sure what the right thing is there specifically.
I feel like we shouldn't even have the requirement. We should make the assumption that if it is, I know a weak assumption, but making the assumption that if someone is doing a cherry pick, it's because they need it for that branch. And let the patch
I don't know that I would assume that.
Well, no, and let the patch release team still has to do the analysis, but at that point, the criticality is useless.
So at this point, here's what the review typically looks like. We look and see what labels come in. It's probably 50-50 whether it even is labeled with a kind. And then I'd say it's probably 50-50 whether it has a priority as well. And of those that do have priority, generally they're important long-term. So it's like there's low signal there, but when it comes in with a kind bug, kind failing test, priority critical urgent, like those are some initial indicators, but then we go off and we look at the parent PR, we look at the linked issues, we look at other mentions and make an assessment. We look at the description of the bug, the symptom of what's failing. We look at the code fix, the size of the code fix.
So you almost want more of the inputs, like, is this the default configuration? Is this a crashing bug? Is this an alpha feature? Like, rather than the label,
Yeah, so what
the label's a first pass indicator on confidence, I think, of the submitter, actually, as opposed to the something more higher quality than that.
Yeah, so all I'm implying there is that that's a process that you're going to go through anyway, right? You're going to determine the criticality, you're going to determine some of the impact and all of that stuff, right? As the patch release team, right? So yes, while it gives you initial signal, like it is it super useful? Based on what you've said.
So what I was going to summarize with the final words that I didn't quite say was we basically don't use it. It's if it's there and it's marked critical urgent and the rest of the evidence supports that, it tells it it's part of the story, but on its own, it's a very low quality signal.
Okay, cool. All right, so any final remarks on that one? Okay, all right. I think we have, all right, we're down to discussing stability releases. Can we do it in 17 minutes? Let's see. All right, so there have been multiple requests across multiple years and multiple venues, whether it be Twitter issues, face-to-face calls at KubeCon, about doing doing stability releases, right? And Jordan has put some really good feedback on that one so far. My initial pushback, there was a Twitter thread that started, and my initial pushback there was that deciding that 117 would be a stability release, that it does not give anyone enough time to actually do planning, any meaningful planning of what stability means to them for, for SIG related work or for company related work. For companies who have product teams that focus on Kubernetes related things, they may have set their roadmap already, and we can't ask them, it's not fair to ask them to try to pivot that within the span of a few weeks, right? So this is something that I think that we can focus on, but it's something that I want to make sure is well planned, because at the end of it, I don't want to say our stability release was a failure because of planning. That seems a silly reason for it to be a failure. So additional notes on that is that we should try, like, I kind of don't like the idea of a stability release because we should always be stable, right? The idea, like, a stability release implies that, like, the rest of our releases are not as stable, and I don't want that to ever be true. One of the big problems that we have here is that we need to codify what it means to be stable, right? And we don't have we have some of the signals that we need to do that today, but we need to coalesce them into something usable and actionable. And Jordan mentions a bunch of stuff, and I see he's come on video to mention a few things, so I'll let him take that.
I was just going to say, like, pragmatically, the number one thing that we can do to improve stability, I think, is CI signal, like the test coverage of a feature and then how flaky the tests for that feature are. And so I think you're right that we can't say, I mean, 117 has started now. We can't say in the first 2 weeks of 117, like, surprise, no features. But I think it's perfectly fine to say whatever you're working on needs to be improving stability. And so what that means is, like, for a feature, and this is supposed to be part of the KEPs already, like listing out where are the tests for this feature. And when we go look at the test grids for those tests, are they flaky? And if so, like, where are the issues and pull requests that are fixing those flakes? Like, these are, I think I mentioned the extensibility work that we did over 115 and 116. And that was a big part of what we did, was burning down all the flakes, and in the process fixed a bunch of real bugs. And so that, like, it's I think it's a cop-out to say, not a cop-out, I think it's easy to say, we want to always be prioritizing stability and then never get into specifics. And from my experience, like, the best way to make things stable is to make sure there are tests and make sure they're green and make sure they're green all the time. And, like, that flushes out a lot of issues. And so I would like to see, like, when we're getting close to freeze or feature freeze for 117, like, push on the test plans for these things. Like, be specific, give me a link to the test grid that filters down to the tests for this feature. So if I'm looking at a KEP, I can click and see, like, how many tests are there? How green are they? And, like, forcing that level of specificity around tests and test health, I think will make it a lot easier for the release team to, like, look at a KEP and say, all right, are we in good shape for this? Here are 3 test grid links. Nope, totally red and flaky. Like, this is bad. and without kind of the binary feature or fix mentality. It's fine to work on features, but you better be doing it in a stable way. And I think that might be the link that will let us push towards like every release being more stable than the one before.
I can say a lot of the like KEPs, they don't have links to any of the dashboards or anything like that. They just say in the test plan, we're going to add like unit tests for this. They don't actually link out to anything. They just have a little description of what they plan to do.
Yeah, and some of that is like until you write the code and know what package it lives in and what the tests are going to be called, like you don't know exactly what the filter will be. But at the same time, like you can pick a tag name for your E2Es and like pre-construct a link. A lot of it is examples. Like the KEP template doesn't have examples of like you should include a test grid link here with the tag for your E2E tests, and then add that tag to your E2E tests. Like even something as simple as that would kind of point people in the right direction to go like, oh, right, I should have a place I can look for healthy tests, and kind of getting people going in that direction.
I think for that we'd have to announce that this is becoming a requirement or something along those lines. Then say at this release you have to have the link out for it, something to like go from like alpha to beta or something like that.
I mean, about that.
The test plan is already supposed to be part of the KEP. Asking for a specific test plan doesn't seem like it's changing the requirement. It just seems like it's actually saying, no, really, where are your tests?
Yeah, and by just making a slight update to the template that guides people to the form, I think that would be really useful. And it's part of what's already expected. It just guides people to a form that's more consistently consumable.
Jordan, would you mind commenting? I popped something in the chat. Would you mind commenting on that issue?
Sure.
At least regarding like the KEPs and things that are currently there, we've had multiple iterations of all the KEPs with all of the different forms of like the template. So it's getting back to the older ones and just pinging them, letting them know that this is now a requirement.
And some of them have like specific plans, and so for those, it won't be burdensome to be like, hey, can you drop a link in for people who want to go find your tests? Like it'll take 2 minutes. And for the ones that didn't ever go write tests, like
they should have
I mean, the ping is a good nudge to say maybe go execute the test plan you said you were going to do.
And even if we don't aim for like 100% compliance on this new idea this week, like to have it in the template going forward, we're nudging quality in the positive direction.
That I 100% agree with.
And I think like the quality thing, I don't think anyone would disagree that we want it. Half of it is like getting distracted with a million things going on, and like you do the implementation, you get it reviewed, and then you're like, oh, I'll get to that like next week, and the next week something else is on fire. And so like just having the more things we can put in front of people to remind them, oh yeah, like actually you need to do this. This is part of this. Do it as you go. I think people will do the right thing more often than not, as long as it's like the path is kind of laid out for them.
Agreed. I know that this was a hot topic, so more voices. Who else has opinions?
I might want to chime in, just maybe more from what I perceive as an emotional need than just as much a technical need. There seems to be just the idea that, hey, we have a lot of tech debt out there. We don't have enough time to address bugs or things feel unstable. And I think that's why there's this notion of there needs to be a point where there's like at least a check-in, like a periodic predictable cadence where teams do that sit-down review and are able to see, okay, how healthy am I? How healthy are our components? Are we at a point where we're not as stable as we need to be and we need to push back or stop new shiny feature work so that we can clean house, get things in order before we move forward?
Yeah, so this is something I mentioned that like it would be good to have SIG planning events. Every SIG should go and do this right around code freeze time, right? Supposedly your code is frozen, right? So that's a good time to go and introspect on the work that you're doing, the work that you plan to be doing for the next cycle, as well as the stability of the features that you have land for the current cycle. But I'm not sure how many people actually do planning events. So
To be clear, I think like SIGs and subprojects should be perfectly free to declare a particular release a stability release and say, like,
Yeah.
our component, like, we need to pay down debt and we shouldn't go add more things, or like, I think that makes a lot of sense at that level of granularity. Where
Cluster Lifecycle, I know, has done that here and there within their SIG, and I'm sure others have as well.
yeah,
No, network has as well.
yeah.
And that's part of why I opened the issue initially was like, I know that this is a change in pattern. Let's discuss it to see, like, is it conceivable, since it's a pattern that exists, that everybody would be willing to do one altogether, or what the complexity of that would be, like what it looks like. And there's obviously a lot of conflicting opinions on it.
Yeah, I think we need more people doing it before we say we can do it as a group.
And the other thing I think that we didn't really discuss is that it's kind of become a pattern in our fourth quarter of the calendar that we have a lot of conflicts on the calendar. So we have a shorter cycle, and we try to at least message that SIG should try to reduce the amount of work they're putting on new features, and by virtue of that, shift a little focus towards stability, just because there's less time to do major things and get something actually ready for release with quality in a shortened cycle. So it is possibly something that you could view as just an extension of what we are already doing.
Yes. I think that I want to make sure that we're also not suggesting that it should only be something that we do in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it could be any time, but if we're already doing a 2-month thing that we signal from the release team, we'd like to be a more stability-focused release than feature-focused release. It feels like an incremental change to say, well, what would it look like to do this other thing that we see other projects doing, these shorter, stable releases and feature releases alternating in some way.
Yeah. All right.
One thing that we didn't discuss just now, and I don't feel like came up really in the issue there, was what this would even look like the further out we get in the future with more of the core split. Would we need to have alignment from other things if we think of, or would this only be KK focused, and would the end user experience still be lacking if the set of things that form a running cluster, if you think of that as a distribution, that at a distribution level, it wasn't a stability release? Does it matter even if KK did something like that? Would it be discernible to an end user?
the distributed nature is why I think like trying to get all contributors to all code that goes into a release to move in lockstep is not.
Yeah, I don't think it could work.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if we were managing the dependencies or third-party integrations more tightly, and they were all versioning themselves, whatever their way of doing it was, if we had some way of assessing the quality, and maybe we don't pick their latest release because it's just come out and is bleeding edge, but we go one prior, or things like that, that is a pattern in existing distributions. They pick and choose and curate what they bring into their next major release integration. But that's something that's a pretty major level of sophistication from a release integration and documentation testing compared to what we do today. Right. Making that subjective analysis on all of those things.
As opposed to the current requirement that it compile.
Pretty much.
It's a high bar. I know. We can do it.
Well, and the fact that we're all laughing at that, and I think we're all laughing at it in like a funny, sad
It's
way.
like, haha, my heart hurts.
Yeah, I think that is part of the essence of why there is some appeal to doing this. Like we do want to actually raise this bar.
Yes, what I want to make sure we do is that we actually raise the bar and don't just sort of. I've told a couple of people my favorite phrase is stability theater, where we like declare this is the stability release and we change our practices for a release, but maybe don't actually advance the bar as much as we think, and then we go back the next release and kind of just resume feature, no tests or flaky tests, and
Yeah.
feel
And
good
then
about
come back
ourselves
to it at the end
because
of the year again.
we definitely had a stability release. So
well, we do Simver. We incremented the number, so it's good.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times, like, whether it be in company blog posts or like media interviews, where you get asked, like, oh, well, what's the theme? And quite frequently we go, it's stability. Kubernetes is like, it's stable and it's boring now. And like, I've said that enough times that like I couldn't count at this point. But you know, it should be consistently true. It should be something that we strive to achieve for every release, and have a framework in place to do that. I know there were some mention about like error budgets for SIGs and things like. I was like, I don't know how far I want to go into that. I don't think that it's needed. It would be nice to introspect on, but I'm not sure that it should be a requirement. But yeah, we are 1 minute to the close of the meeting. I feel like we have more to talk about, but we should figure out a structured way of doing this. Like, what is the next step? What is the first next step? Right. There are quite a few things that we need to do to get this done, or to provide a framework for making this more successful. So what do those look like? So we should chat again about this. Sounds good? All right, everyone, thank you for your time. Always fun chatting with you all. I will catch you in 2 weeks on the next SIG release meeting. Take it easy.
Good day, everybody.